Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laran, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaran.com. Hello, and welcome to episode 156. 156 is a good number, and the title of this week's episode is Liminality. This week's episode is an encore. This is one of my more popular episodes from 2019, and I'm talking about a concept that I discovered called liminality and why it describes my entire life. Now, the reason I'm playing an encore for you, and I'm going to play it here shortly, is because I'm in the middle of my challenge, and I want to give myself as much time as possible to complete the challenge. Now, to let you know how things are going, they're not going very well. It's day 7. I'm supposed to be at about 35,000 words, and I'm only at 15. So it looks like at this point, unless I have a couple of monster days, that I'm not going to win my challenge. But I can potentially win a silver or a bronze medal. So I'm going to keep at it, keep going at it. And so I'm going to save myself a little bit of time and play this repeat. This would be a great episode for maybe folks who haven't heard it. But essentially, I talk about how I started seeing a therapist based on some issues that I had with my biological father and some of the learnings and some of the things that I learned about myself that may resonate with you as well. A lot of people wrote me after this episode and said that it resonated with them. So I hope that it resonates with you, and I will be back next week with an update on my challenge. But in the meantime, hope that you have a wonderful week. And here is episode, I don't remember what episode number it is, but the Liminality episode. Take care. So the main topic of what I wanted to talk about today was something in my personal life that I've decided to share. It's not really a huge deal, but for some people they might think, "Oh my God, that's kind of crazy." So I've mentioned on the podcast and in my writing life and in interviews and in public speaking events, the story about my father, right? That my father and my mother divorced when I was very young. And I did not have the opportunity to meet him, and he wanted nothing to do with me, and I always struggled with that growing up, particularly over the last few years when I tried to go find him and tried to reach out and reconnect with him and maybe establish some sort of relationship, and he still didn't want anything to do with me. And so there was just something over the past year or so that had just really been eating at me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't articulate it, but it was just gnawing away at me, and I just couldn't deal with it. I would write a lot of books, and I would absorb myself in my work, but I think in some respects I ignored it, or I didn't deal with it in the way that I should have. And so I kind of recognized that, maybe I need to do something about this, right? I can't carry this emotion or feeling around with me for the rest of my life. Maybe I need to get some help, right? And so I actually went to a therapist. I've got, I think, a 2-month package with the therapist, and I just tried to find somebody to talk to, right? And the therapist kind of asked me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not here because I'm depressed, or I'm not here because anything horrible in my life has happened. I'm just here because I just need to talk about some things that I've never really truly articulated in my life." And so we've been working through, what some of these emotions mean, and how to maybe reframe them and think about them in a different way. And I honestly think it's been pretty helpful. I think it was Dean Wesley Smith that said once, he said that if you ever start to become successful, you get counseling. And when he said it, I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And lo and behold, here I am. And I think in many respects he was right. And so it's one of those things where it's like, do you admit that you're getting help on something like this, or do you not? And I've always taken the approach. I'm not going to share like intimate details or too much, but I honestly think, I've been through 2 sessions so far, and I feel really good after coming out of them. I didn't go into this thinking that I would, instantly be better, right? For me, it was more about the journey. It was more about just having someone who is a third person who knows nothing about me, who might see things a little bit differently and allow me to maybe see myself in a different mirror, right, than I've been seeing myself in the past few years. And honestly, I think it has been very beneficial. I would almost say that it's almost a requirement if you're a writer. And we talked a lot about my writing, and we talked a lot about how I cope with things in life, and how I deal with people, and what my relationships are like. And for the most part, everything was pretty positive, but it was just pretty helpful to have somebody hold a mirror in front of me and say, what do you see? Because this is what I see, right? And so that's been helpful. Ironically enough, a lot of the things that we talked about really didn't have much to do with my dad. There were some things that were more grounded in just how I see myself, and maybe some of the bullying that I had when I was a kid, and things like that I think maybe had a bigger impact on me in terms of my psyche, and in terms of why I am the way I am. And so I just look forward to seeing where the journey goes. And this is my public service announcement to you who are listening, that don't be ashamed of going to therapy. For a while I was like, oh, I don't want to tell people that I'm going to therapy. But I thought, there's really nothing wrong with it. And maybe the world will be much better if people did go. Really, honestly. But if you're feeling down, or if there's something that's just eating away at you and you can't figure it out, or if you've been through some sort of a trauma in your life, or some sort of an illness, maybe therapy is a really good thing. And one of the things that we were talking about was this concept of liminality. Liminality, it's spelled Liminality. And I actually found out about this in a TED Talk. There's a book that I really, really like. It's called Be a Free-Range Human, and it's by Marianne Cantwell. And she is a phenomenal writer. She's, in many respects, the OG digital entrepreneur. She was doing the whole travel lifestyle and location-independent lifestyle before that was really a thing. And that book definitely changed my outlook. When I first read it, I think it was back in I think I read the book in 2013. And it was right when it first came out. And it was just, it completely changed my thoughts on what it means to be different in a different society, right? So one of the things that she talks about is, things that you consider weaknesses in yourself. I mean, think about your strengths, and then think about your weaknesses. Might it be true that a weakness is just a strength in the wrong environment? And it's not a weakness because there's something wrong with you. It's a weakness because the environment that you're in doesn't appreciate it, or that the skills that you have can't be used in the environment that you're in. I think that's good advice for work. I think that's good advice for life. And I think what that really means is, if you are not in the right place, find another place, right? And so anyway, long digression, but I highly recommend Be a Free-Range Human. And I actually just came out with a second edition, which is how I discovered Marianne's TED Talk. And she did a TED Talk that went viral. And her TED Talk, I think it was called, and I'll link to it in the show notes. The TED Talk was called The Power of Not Always Fitting In, or something like that. And she talks about this concept, and it's called liminality. And it's this idea that it's a transitional space. It's a space between two places, right? So if you think about an airport is a liminal space. You're not there for very long. If you think about a subway station, that's a liminal space. An Uber car is a liminal space. So anyway, it's a transition. And there are many phases in our life where we find ourselves in a liminal space. And it can be very uncomfortable because it seems like we've lost direction, and it seems like you don't know what's next, and it is intensely uncomfortable because you're probably dealing with some discomfort. Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe you yourself are dealing with some sort of an illness, and the future seems really uncertain. And you're trying to find a place where you belong. And what Marianne talks about in the talk, and I absolutely love this talk, and she talked about this from a interest perspective and a passions perspective. There are a lot of people out there that don't know what their calling is. And so imagine if you have a sailboat and you're going from different islands, and you go to one island and maybe you like it, but you just don't feel like you belong there. And then you get in your sailboat and you go to another island and you like it, but you just don't quite fit in. And what happens is it's almost like this existential sailing. You're just sailing from place to place to place, but you can't really ever find a place where you belong. And her concept was maybe that's okay. Maybe instead of trying to find a place where you belong, you just have to create your own island, right? And maybe that means you take a little bit from island A and a little bit from island B and a little bit from island C. You create your own island, and then that island becomes a place where other people want to visit, right? That was an interesting concept. And so I started exploring this a little bit more, and this idea that, maybe it's, people think of liminal spaces as, well, it's just temporary. But what if as writers, that's where we actually live, right? If you think about it, we're constantly creating work, and when we're creating that work, the work itself is kind of a liminal space for us. When we write a book and we write a novel, that novel's going to end. And the world that we've created for ourselves and that we've played in and had fun with and gotten to know the characters and had fun writing, and we have to say goodbye to that. And so then that space goes away. We move into another book, the land of another book. And so maybe we are permanently in a liminal space. I thought that was interesting. So I did some more research on it. Excuse me. I did some more research on this, and I found a website, and it was, I think, a therapy place out of Seattle, and there was a really interesting quote. Now, this is a long quote, but I think you'll find this interesting. So this is from, I think it's called liminalspace.com, and it says, author and theologian Richard Rohr describes a liminal space as a place where we are betwixt and between the familiar and the completely unknown. There alone is our world left behind, while we are not yet sure of the new existence. That's a good space where genuine newness can begin. Get there often and stay as long as you can, by whatever means possible. This is the sacred space where the old world is about to fall apart and a bigger world is revealed. If we don't encounter liminal space in our lives, we start idealizing normalcy. The threshold is God's waiting room. Here we are taught openness and patience as we come to expect an appointment with the divine doctor. These thresholds of waiting and not knowing our next are everywhere in life, and they are inevitable. Each ushers in a new chapter of life and holds varying degrees of disruption. So to tie all of this together, right, I started therapy, and I was talking to my therapist about sometimes I don't feel like I fit in any place, right? So, when I was a kid, I was African American, but I never really fit in with the black kids, and I never really fit in with the white kids. And so I didn't really belong. I could never find a place where I belonged, right? And as a writer, in many respects, I don't always fit in with the writing crowds. And at work, I don't always fit in with the work crowds. And I've learned to be comfortable with that. I've learned to be okay with that. But there was always that weird, I never really knew why my dad abandoned me kind of thing. And so that has been this weird liminal space that I've never been able to resolve, right? But I have to get comfortable with that. And so what does all of that mean with my writing identity? And I don't know. I don't know. It's a journey, but this whole concept of liminality, I thought, really described how I was feeling and where I was or where I am right now developmentally in my life. And I share that because it resonated with me. Maybe it doesn't resonate with everyone who's listening to this, but maybe there's one person out there who was meant to hear this message today. And maybe that describes what you're feeling, or it articulates what you've been feeling for a long time. Because I know that when I saw this talk from Marianne, she articulated some things that I had felt for a very long time, but could never quite get out. So anyway, that is really all I wanted to talk about this week. It got a little deep, but I thought that was interesting. I didn't have a whole lot to talk about last week, so I thought that would be a little fun. I'll share more about some of our sessions and kind of how things are going. Because like I said, there's really nothing wrong with me. It's just something that I wanted to explore in my own life. And so I hope everyone is doing well. Hope wherever you are, there's not snow on the ground as there is here. Yeah, we're getting some more snow, which I think I mentioned earlier in the show. So that's always fun. But with that, I hope everyone's having a great November. If you are doing NaNoWriMo, I hope that your novel is off to a great start. And I'll holler at you next week. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelaran.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelaran.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.